Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into defending the perimeter and specifically how smash and grab crews pick their targets. I'm stepping into the role of your dedicated security consultant today, and we've got a highly focused briefing ahead of us. If you're a small business owner, a retail manager, or anyone responsible for a commercial property, you already know the threat landscape has changed. So today we are going to look at exactly how to actively harden your storefronts against organized intrusion. We're not dealing in fear here. We're dealing in hard data, proven patterns, and highly actionable defense strategies.
It's the question keeping every property owner up at night, right? How do these crews actually pick their targets? Well, I want to shatter a really dangerous myth right out of the gate. Commercial break-ins are almost never random acts of bad luck. These aren't chaotic crimes of opportunity. When a mobilized crew hits a storefront, it's actually the result of a highly predictable, repeatable operational playbook. They're looking for very specific weaknesses, and once you know what those are, you can literally take yourself off their menu. Okay, let's dive into this.
59. That is a critical number. It represents 59 verified commercial break-in incidents that took place across Northern California from January to May of 2026. This isn't just anecdotal. By analyzing these 59 events, a crystal clear picture starts to emerge of exactly how these crews operate, what they're looking for, and what makes them turn away from one storefront only to crash through another. To give us some geographic context, these verified incident hotspots from early 2026 show us exactly where the activity clustered. We saw heavy concentrations in Alameda County with 18 incidents, tracking right down through San Joaquin, Sacramento, Santa Clara, and into Yolo, Fresno, and Placer counties. Now, it's absolutely crucial to understand the caliber of these events. The data isn't tracking low-level shoplifting or minor vandalism. We're talking about severe forced entry burglaries, organized ram raids, and heavily equipped crews. These are serious physical breaches. Section 1. The spree clusters over single hits. You see, crews overwhelmingly prioritize operational efficiency. Once a crew has staged their vehicles, positioned their lookouts, and mapped out their exit routes, the marginal cost of hitting a second or even a third storefront on that same block is incredibly low. In fact, our dataset shows a single night along a Sacramento commercial corridor where one coordinated crew hit 9 separate businesses. They work in clusters, moving rapidly down a mobilized zone. Because of this, the relevant question is not, is my storefront a target? The relevant question is my corridor a target? If a crew decides your block is their target for the night, your business is already in the crosshairs. You can't just rely on the fact that the boutique next door looks a bit flashier than yours. If they're on your street, they'll hit you on their way out unless your physical perimeter actively forces them to stop and reconsider.
Section 2. The target profile.
So if they're hitting entire corridors, what specific types of businesses are drawing these crews there in the first place? Well, take a look at the high-risk verticals. High-end retail, restaurants, and cannabis dispensaries significantly over-index in the dataset. Why? Because they all share a really deadly combination of vulnerability factors. They present visible, high-value inventory or cash, they typically have low or even zero overnight staffing, and critically, they rely on expansive glass-fronted architecture to invite customers in during the day. That combo of visibility and fragile glass, that's the ultimate green light for an organized crew.
And that brings us to what happens after a breach, which introduces a terrifying vulnerability known as the Plywood signal. When a storefront is hit and the glass is shattered, owners naturally board it up with plywood while they wait for repairs. Makes sense, right? But to a street crew, that plywood is a massive neon advertisement. It's a visible indicator that the underlying security posture hasn't been upgraded, and that temporary barrier is actually physically weaker than the glass was. In Stockton, a single market was hit 3 separate times in one weekend simply because they were relying on temporary boarding. It is an incredibly high-risk aftermath window.
Section 3. Anatomy of a breach. Now that we know how they pick their target zones, let's pivot to the physical execution. How are they actually getting inside? Smashed or boarded glass was the specific entry point in 29 of the documented breaches. Add in the 8 intentional vehicle ram raids, which, by the way, also heavily target front glass, and the reality becomes pretty undeniable. Front glass is the overwhelming architectural failure point for the vast majority of commercial properties. Crews engineer their breach against the weakest visible structural element. Almost every single time, that's your front window. And the timing of these breaches dictates our defense strategy. The data shows 2 distinct operational time clusters. The late evening window, around 7 p.m. to 11 p.m., favors armed robberies targeting open businesses to extract cash or goods. That requires operational and personnel defenses. But the overnight window, roughly 2 a.m. to 6 a.m., is where the smash and grab crews really thrive.
They want closed businesses, they want slow police response times, and they want zero witnesses. To survive that overnight window, you absolutely must have heavy physical perimeter hardening.
Section 4. The internal clock. Here is the good news. While these crews are highly mobilized and devastatingly effective, they have one massive, totally exploitable weakness. Their entire operation relies on an incredibly tight internal clock, 60 to 90 seconds. In the security industry, we call this the 60 to 90 second rule. It's the standard working assumption that most crews will absolutely abandon a breach if gaining entry takes longer than a minute and a half. They simply can't afford to spend 3 minutes prying at a reinforced door or hammering at security film. If they get bogged down, the risk of getting caught skyrockets, so they just cut their losses and move to the next storefront.
To really understand why that 90-second threshold exists, you have to realize just how incredibly fast they intend to work. In one verified Sacramento incident, a crew breached the glass, entered the premises, extracted $1,200 in merchandise, and vanished in under 20 seconds. 20 seconds! In another case at a Stockton area mall, a 4-person crew destroyed multiple interior glass cases and extracted high-value jewelry in under a minute. Speed literally defines the operation. So if you take away their speed, you defeat the attack.
Section 5. Hardening your perimeter.
So how exactly do we exploit their tight operational clock? It's time to shift from just diagnosing the threat to actively hardening your perimeter. Here is your actionable defense playbook. Step 1. Secure that front glass. You need visible physical barriers like rolling security shutters, gates, or high-grade security film. It has to be recognizable from the street so the crew knows your glass isn't an easy shatter. Step 2, and this is your core strategy. Extend the breach time past that 90-second threshold. Make them work for it. And step 3, if you have been hit and you're relying on the plywood signal, you've got to upgrade your permanent security immediately to close that high-risk aftermath window. If you take away anything today, let it be this. You do not need to build an uncrackable, impenetrable fortress. Honestly, that's just cost-prohibitive and visually terrible for retail. You simply need to extend the time required to breach past the crew's 90-second internal clock. By adding visible friction, you fundamentally alter their risk calculus. You make your business the wrong storefront on the block, and that forces them to move on. I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought. Next time you're at your business, go outside and look at your storefront from the street. Look at your front glass, your doors, your locks. If a mobilized crew rolls down your corridor at 3 a.m. tonight, will your physical perimeter extend their breach time past 90 seconds? Will you defeat their clock? If the answer's no, or even if you just aren't sure, it is time to take action. Use the data we covered today to harden your defenses and protect what you've worked so hard to build. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Stay safe and stay secure.